Design question 2. Helping students interact with new knowledge. The desired effect of this design question is that students understand and process new content. The structure of design question 2 helps teachers plan for students' navigation through new information. The first exposure to new knowledge sets the tone for how well a student will understand the information. To fully address design question 2, helping students interact with new knowledge, the teacher must first know that this is truly new information for the students. Then use those elements in design question 2 to intentionally plan for students interact with the information or processes that they may be hearing for the first time. Design question 2, helping students interact with new knowledge, contains the following elements. Element 6, identifying critical information. 7, organizing students to interact with new knowledge. 8, previewing new content. 9, chunking content into digestible bites. 10, processing of new information. 11, elaborating on new information. 12, recording and representing knowledge. And 13, reflecting on learning. Let's go even deeper. These elements can also be represented this way. The 8 elements within design question 2 can also look like this, a model of gradual release of how students interact with how they learn new information. When introducing new content, it is imperative that teachers identify essential elements of information that we call critical input experiences because of their importance in the processing of teaching and learning new content. Critical input experiences should be fast-moving, engaging, and come in many forms such as visual, dramatic, and narrative activities. As you see, the first 4 elements here, elements 6 through 9, are in red because they are teacher-directed. The remaining elements, elements 10 through 13, are where the teacher gradually releases to the student to independently work through the new information. They're more student-owned. Since it's new information, the intent is that we hit all of those elements within the design question. It's really important that the teacher identify critical information because the student hasn't seen this information before, so it wouldn't make sense for the students to identify that critical information yet because they don't know what's critical information yet. So obviously that's important for the teachers to do at this point. The teachers are organizing students to interact with that new information intentionally. They're previewing that new information and content for the students, and they're chunking the content intentionally. It's really important for the students to be the ones that are processing that new information, that they are elaborating on the new information, that the teacher's not the one that's elaborating for them, but that the students are doing that elaboration, and that the students are recording their thinking, not what the teacher is thinking or what the teacher has recorded as notes. So they're not just copying over the mindless notes, but what is the students learning, capturing their learning, their thinking, and then the students' reflection of what they have learned. We must plan intentionally to hit all of these elements within design question 2. When planning, we identify strategies that will result in the desired effect of each of these elements. And remember that the desired effect is the intended result of the teacher's strategy, what you want to happen as the result of that element. So what are some examples of each of these elements? Let's take a look now. That first element, element 6, identifying critical information, the desired effect is that students can describe and explain the level of importance of the content. So by highlighting the information that's critical, students will be able to actively engage in the learning process and then have a deeper understanding of what they're learning. So some examples of this could be that we give students the opportunity to discuss what they already know about the critical information. This is important because they can make connections to prior learning that have occurred, or even connections to how what they're about to learn connects to their life, or things that they already know, things that they can connect to in their brain already. Incorporate relevant media, such as audio clips, video clips, or article excerpts, so something that they can connect with visually. Show enthusiasm. If you're excited, they get excited. Explain the rationale, how it connects to real world. That gets them excited, and then they can see why it's relevant to their lives. What might it look like in your classroom? So each learning goal should have highlighted critical information that provides focus for the teacher and students. Critical input experiences should utilize a variety of learning modalities and be multifaceted and engaging to help that information anchor in our students' memories. Next in that cycle is organizing students. And you'll see here, element 7, organizing students in order to interact with that new knowledge. Well, the desired effect here is that students are able to move to groups efficiently, and group norms have been established and followed, which allows students to interact with new knowledge and deepen their understanding. So why should we do this? Well, active processing of new information in groups is crucial to their understanding. When they're exposed to the thinking of others and they're able to clarify their own understanding, that is so important. It really helps to solidify the information in their brains. They're able to verbalize their thinking to other people and hear other perspectives. How important is that? Cooperative learning and other small group processes allow students to experience content from multiple perspectives. Group interaction, it facilitates knowledge development, and it creates awareness that is difficult and impossible without interaction. It's not possible to achieve without that collaborative setting. And it provides multiple reference points and fosters a personal processing of new content. So how can this be done? Well, just like we do in our PLCs and in our professional lives, we need to help our students be able to establish group routines, norms, and roles. So this is something that we really need to teach them how to do so that they can successfully participate and interact appropriately. This isn't something we should just expect them to know how to do. We really need to support them with that. Develop a task sheet that guides group work. Rearrange groups often so that they can work with a variety of people. Consider the purpose of the lesson when deciding which kind of groups to use. So that goes back to specifically what they're learning and what structure of grouping would be best to enhance meeting that learning goal. And also consider the desired effect. What type of student organization will best support reaching the desired effect? Sometimes it's a larger group that is going to best support the activity or the goal that we're working towards. And sometimes it's small groups. It really just depends on what you're doing. Teach students how to transition to and from their pairs or groups quickly. So that's really important. And that's not something that we can always just do at the first week of school and then we never revisit again. It's just like our group norms and our routines and our roles. It's something that we continue to hit on because as the school year moves forward, our needs change and we have new needs and different needs that arise and different school members that join our class. And so those things need to be revisited, and depending upon the work that we're doing and the activities that we're using, those things need to be revisited. Here's some additional information if you'd like to pause the video and utilize this resource. Next in line is previewing, element 8. Element 8, previewing new content. The desired effect is that students can link prior knowledge to new content. Providing an opportunity for students to preview content in some way allows students to begin thinking about new content and activate prior knowledge and make linkages between the two is so critical. Research has shown that previewing techniques such as advanced organizers and cues create direct links between previous learning and new content and are associated with 32 percentile gain in student achievement. That is huge. Previewing is especially important for students who have limited background knowledge about the topic. Again, here are some examples if you'd like to pause the video to learn some deeper knowledge around previewing strategies. Next, we have chunking content, which is element 9. Chunking content into digestible bites. Doesn't that sound yummy? So desired effect is students can process information in small chunks. Why chunk content? Well, our brains become overwhelmed when we're given too much information. We all know that. So breaking the content into small chunks allows our brain to actively process the information. When students are introduced to brand new concepts, the chunks should be smaller to allow our brains time to process and make connections to that new material. The more students know about the material, the larger the chunks can be. That makes sense, doesn't it? So that's also how we need to think about as teachers. We need to be mindful about our students' background knowledge and what they're learning. That's what's so great about this framework of instruction. When we look at design questions 2, 3, and 4, and we look at introducing new knowledge and then deepening and then that hypothesis generation, we're really being mindful about that chunking of the content. Here are some more examples that you can use. You can welcome to pause it to get in deeper of some examples of how to chunk the content. But really, in summary, it's about pacing and monitoring. Those are some strategies that you can use. Scaffolding, in between chunks, providing opportunities for students to process and reflect. And utilizing the framework, it really builds those opportunities. Like the framework is built to chunk content. So if we're using that, we really are chunking the learning for our students. Next is processing, which is element 10. Processing of new information. And the desired effect is that students can explain what they have just learned, ask clarifying questions, and/or actively discuss the content. So why should we do this? After each small chunk of information is provided, students should work in small groups to describe, discuss, and make predictions regarding the new information. Group processing focused on students generating conclusions about the new information adds rigor to the learning. That is huge. This is where the students make that transition to their owning the learning. This is where they begin to take ownership of their learning and they are processing what they are learning. Up till now, it's really been more teacher-owned, and this is where the students take ownership. Big transition. So what might this look like? Well, when a student's asked, they might be able to explain what they've just learned. They could volunteer predictions about what might happen or what might the goal look like. They might voluntarily ask clarifying questions. They might be actively discussing the content in groups. So group members might ask each other and answer questions about the information. They might make predictions about what they expect next. And then next, we'd like to see them elaborating, which is element 11. elaborating on that new information. And so the desired effect of this element is that students can elaborate on and or make inferences based upon what was explicitly taught. So once they've had an opportunity to process that new knowledge, which was the prior element, the next step here is we want them to elaborate on what they have learned by asking questions. So well-planned questions are a productive way to encourage students to incorporate their own thinking into the learning. Questioning techniques compel students to go beyond what was introduced by making inferences and provide evidence to support their claims. So let me give you some examples. This is a great example here. Or reference, I should say. There's general inferential questions and elaborative interrogation questions. So general inferential questions, require students to use his or her existing knowledge and combine it with the information gained from the instruction to deduce meaning or forecast what will happen in the future. So some examples of how we might scaffold this is we might ask questions like, how do these plants and animals survive in this harsh environment? So this isn't a yes or no question. Obviously they have had to have learned something from the instruction that's taken place in order to answer this question, but they are still owning their learning. They still have to explain something. They have to make some inferences here. When blank is used, does it present a particular danger to other things or people? Why? What is the process for making blank? So they have to explain the process. What equipment is typically used in this event? So here's some examples, right? Elaborative interrogative questions are an extension of the inferential questions because students are required to support their deductive or logical reasoning. So it takes it a step further because they have to support with logical reasoning. So why do you think this is true? What evidence supports your conclusion? How did you come to your conclusion? What do you expect would happen if? What would happen if the part of the story was changed? So see how it takes it a step further. They have to use deductive skills or logical reasoning to support what they said. We as teachers would have to prepare these types of questions in advance. However, the students would obviously have to have learned from the lesson in order to answer these questions. These would be a great way to help them elaborate to see if or to support them, I should say, in elaborating on new information. This is a great strategy. Next is recording, which is element 12. Element 12, recording and representing knowledge. The desired effect of this element is that students demonstrate knowledge of critical content using linguistic or non-linguistic methods. So as students work through processing activities and refine their understanding of new content, linguistic and non-linguistic tasks contribute to the learning journey. Non-linguistic activities require students to generate and represent new information that does not rely on language. So for example, a student can draw a diagram to represent a concept and explain it to a classmate. It's important that when students are engaged in those tasks that they are recording their own understanding of the information rather than just repeating what the teacher provided. Very important because it is their own representation of their own knowledge, what they learned. Here are some examples of that. Combination notes, free-flowing web, academic notebooks. Their own summaries and notes that include critical content of what they learned. Main points of the lesson. And this is information that you can use further down the line or they can use further down the line where they can revisit it and make corrections to maybe information that they misunderstood. That's fine because remember, this is still new learning for them. but it should be their own thoughts. Finally, we have reflect, which is element 13. Reflecting on learning. The desired effect is that students can self-assess their understanding and effort. This is the final step to be accomplished when students interact with new knowledge. Students need to reflect on their learning process and the experiences they had during the learning journey. Utilizing questions such as these allows the learner to self-monitor their learning and assess their individual progress during the learning experiences. So they can use those above questions there, like what were you right or wrong about? What did you do well today? What aspects did you have difficulty with? What could you have done better with? How confident about what you learned today are you? Describe a part of today's learning that surprised you and why. Those are things that really help them to reflect on their individual progress and learning experience. Go ahead and take a look at the top right box there where it says student evidence. Students can explain what they are clear about and what they are confused about. That's really important. Can describe how hard they tried, and they can explain what they could have done to enhance their learning. We want our students to be able to be critical of themselves and to know what they can do better, and to know what they learned about and what their goals are. And that's where those scales come in, and that's where also they can really look at, okay, this is what I learned today, and this is what my goal is, and this is what I'm going to get better at. This is where I'm going in my learning, and that's really huge. That's where the reflecting on learning really comes in, and those connections between design question 1 and also design question 2 to connect. This is really the summary of design question 2, and thanks for hanging in there with me. I know this is a long video and I was talking a lot, but I appreciate it. There's a lot of great information in here, and I know we didn't go through all of the content that was in these newsletters here, but we provided it all for you, so if you wanted to dig in deeper, you feel free to. It's all there for you. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us. Thank you so much. Have a great day, guys.